How's it going, class? This is Tucker Cooper reporting my final screencast of our Unit 15 investigation of the climate and weather of Eagle, Alaska. First off, I'd like to say how different the two graphs are that have been presented for this investigation. These are the two graphs. One is the weather recordings from the 25th of January through the 2nd of February of 2015, and our second graph is of the weather temperatures from March 22nd through the 30th. And obviously, by looking at the two graphs, we can see that January was obviously a much colder month and significantly lower temperatures than March, as usual. We can see that for January 25th, the maximum temperature was 4 degrees Fahrenheit, while the minimum was -36. This was a temperature range of 40 degrees, and a mean temperature for that day, according to the max and min, was right around -20 degrees. On January 29th, we can see that the max temperature was -35 degrees, and the minimum was -45. This makes the temperature range only 10 degrees apart, while the mean temperature for that day was -40 degrees, so that day was much colder than the beginning of the week. On January 31st, we can see that the max temp of -9 degrees and a minimum of -29 degrees. The temperature range for that day was 20 degrees apart, and the mean temperature was -19 degrees. We can tell by this graph that the climatology predictions were significantly off from the actual temperatures for those days of recorded temperatures. So moving on to the March graph for Eagle, we can see that the max temperature for March 24th was 43 degrees and the minimum temperature was 11. This was a range of 32 degrees for that day, and a mean temperature for that day was 27 degrees. On March 26th, the max temperature was a little higher at 48 degrees, and the minimum temperature was higher from the 24th at 33 degrees, which makes that day's range only 15 degrees apart, and the mean temperature range was right around 41 degrees Fahrenheit. On March 28th, we can see that the max temp is 48 degrees and the minimum is 17 degrees. This makes the temperature range 31 degrees apart, and the mean temperature for that day was 33 degrees. Again, we can tell by this graph that the climatology predictions were a little lower than the actual temperatures, but I would say that this climatology predictions were closer compared to the graph of January. Now, looking at the weather maps of the week of January 25th to February 2nd, we can see why the temperatures were the way they were for that particular day. On Sunday, January 25th, we can see a low pressure system hovering over the Eagle area, causing a large volume of thick clouds to cover the region. I think that the clouds must have brought in a cold temperatures for that day because it started out being warm in the morning and then significantly dropped in temperature towards the evening. On Thursday, January 29th, we can see the high pressure systems beginning to take over the northern regions of Alaska, and a mixed front is being pushed from the south towards Eagle's location. This day was one of the coldest for the week, with a mean temperature of 40 below. On Saturday, January 31st, we now only see this high pressure system hovering over Eagle and the interior. The high pressure system seems to be slightly warming up the Eagle area by bumping in the mean temperature to around -19 degrees for that day. Now, looking at the weather maps for the days recorded from March 22nd through March 30th, we can see why the temperatures were the way they were for that particular day. And on March 24th, we can see that the weather map we can see by the weather map that a strong pressure system was giving Eagle clear skies for that day with a high temperature of 43 degrees. On Thursday, March 26th, we can see a low pressure system beginning to move in from Canada and the Pacific Ocean, causing the high pressure system front to be moved out of the area of Eagle and giving the area some light to moderate cloud coverage for that day. On the final day of Saturday, March 28th, we can see that the low pressure system has moved closer to Eagle, keeping in the clouds and dropping the temperature for that day down from the previous 2 days. So, thanks a lot for watching my Unit 15 investigation report on Eagle, and I wish you all good luck with your finals and have a great summer.